working currently on a lot of our own zero waste policies, so this is a wonderful opportunity for us to learn as well. So thank you for being here. I also just want to acknowledge briefly the other members of our select board who are here, Mark Sandine and Joe Pato, and also very active in this particular arena, and our former state representative, Jay Kaufman, is here as well. So welcome back to the fray. Thank you all, and thank you for convening us.
Thank you, Jill. So I want to just take a moment or two to set the context of what we're talking about here. We all know that solid waste in Massachusetts and across our nation and the entire globe is at a crisis point. Here in Massachusetts, we produce about 6 million tons of trash a year, and most of that is burned and buried. We do have a solid waste master plan that gets updated every 10 years, but in 2020, the last time we had a set of goals, Mass DEP's goal was to decrease our disposal to about 4.5 million tons, and instead we've actually gone backwards now that we're at 6 million tons a year. So that's not a good sign. 16% of our trash, or 1 million tons a year, is plastic. And we all know, or many people know, that plastic is made from fossil fuels. And it's, at this point, polluting our air, water, soil, and many of us have plastics in our bodies, and PFAS and other contaminants that are very dangerous and very unhealthy. I don't know if folks followed the issue of the train derailment in Ohio last week, but the vinyl chloride that was in the rail cars was a petrochemical that is primarily used to make plastics. So we're trucking and shipping in train containers all across our country petrochemicals to make these plastics, and they're dangerous and they're getting into our waterways. And it's now ended up in the Ohio River, contaminating everything from fish to soil to human health. So some plastics, 1s and 2s, are recyclable, but people think that they can be used for clean food products, but usually they're downcycled. They're not actually made into food containers, they're made into things like clothing. And the other thing that folks don't know is that plastics can't be recycled indefinitely. That's about a maximum of 7 times that they can be used. And at that end of life, they then have to be landfilled, incinerated, or they often end up in trash and littered around our communities, which is a real problem. So natural fibers, papers, cardboards, and glass can be recycled, and that can be recycled infinitely. But unfortunately in Massachusetts, our recycling programs are weak. Curbside glass, even when recycled, often ends up into roadbed and landfill cover instead of actually made into new virgin glass materials. We have in Massachusetts 5 operating incinerators, down from 7. We used to have 7. So the good news is we've closed a few, but the problem is we're just shipping it out of state now, contaminating other people's land and water. Many of our incinerators and landfills are in environmental justice neighborhoods. In Massachusetts, 4 out of 5 of those incinerators are in or adjacent to environmental justice communities where people are more vulnerable, where they're already suffering from adverse impacts from environmental degradation. So the 4 EJ communities, Haverhill, North Andover, Saugus, and Millbury, really bear the brunt of all of our trash and all of our failure to adequately reduce the trash that we produce and to recycle more effectively. We've started to phase out these incinerators, but 35% of Massachusetts trash was exported in 2020 to places like New Hampshire, Michigan, upstate New York, Ohio, South Carolina, Alabama, and Virginia. And we should not be foisting our problems on other states or sending it abroad to third world countries. Massachusetts has the 2nd highest tipping fees in the country. So we average around $122 a ton for the disposal of our trash. And our recycling tipping fees are as high as $100 a ton. We're seeing dramatic increases in the cost of municipal waste, and that's a real burden on our local budgets as well. So it's another reason why we have so much to do. So make no mistake, reducing incineration and landfilling is a climate change imperative. Consider that more than 24% of municipal trash is food waste that often decays, creating methane. And if we actually composted all of those food scraps, it would be the equivalent of taking 23 million cars off the road. So that's an impressive climate impact. So for so long, we've thought about waste as sort of a secondary environmental issue, but now that we're really looking seriously at the issue of burning fossil fuels, we understand that controlling and reducing our waste can have a profound and really important impact. So what are we going to do about it? In the legislature, Senator Lewis and I started the Zero Waste Caucus about 2020, just right before the pandemic hit, I think. We started off with maybe 30 members or so. We had a good first year. We have a statement of purpose to work together to reduce and eliminate solid waste in Massachusetts and improve recycling through legislative action, state and local collaboration, information gathering, education, and public outreach. We've grown, and it's incredibly exciting to tell you that this year we have 54 members and counting. So we're bicameral, both House and Senate participates. In the past we've been bipartisan. We hope we will be bipartisan again as we gather members for this session. We also work not just through legislative action, but through education and through influencing administrative actions. DEP is the primary agency at the state level that regulates and oversees waste-related issues, and they produce quite a few regulations that we've had an opportunity to comment on. We've also spent a fair amount of time making sure that they are adequately resourced. So one of the things we're very concerned about is DEP doesn't have the staff capacity potentially to do some of the enforcement that we want to see them do. So we are trying to support them through budgetary actions and through regulatory actions as well. So we also have some priority bills, and we're going to talk about those today. We have yet this session, because we're just starting, we have yet this session to actually determine what our priority bills will be going forward, but it's safe to say that the ones that we've supported in the past years will continue to be our priority bills, and we will likely add additional priority bills this session as we delve into some of the things that have been submitted. We've had 75 waste-related bills submitted this session so far, and I think at the end of our slide, we'll have an opportunity to give you a link if you want to take a look at the spreadsheet of all those bills. So there are three priority bills: the Plastics Omnibus Bill, EPR for packaging, and that stands for Extended Producer Responsibility, and you're going to hear about that, and then the Modernization and Expansion of the Bottle Bill. Other things that we will likely continue to look closely at and prioritize will be the incineration bill, mattress recycling, and electronics recycling, and many other great initiatives. So with that, I'd like to call the first panel up. We are broadcasting live on LexMedia for anyone who wants to tweet out or tell folks at home. We have some hashtags as well. And of course, the program today is called Waste Not, Want Not. And I think we have one more panelist. Let's see. It's me. All right. Here, by the way, are the members of the Zero Waste Caucus. And we'll share this slide presentation later if you want to see who's already a member. And if you don't see your legislator up here on this membership list, make sure you contact them and ask them to join. Okay, so we're already through the opening remarks. Our first panel is the Zero Waste Caucus priority bills. And I'm going to forego doing extensive bios for people. We've had a slide for each person who's speaking because we want to give the speakers more time. We actually have a lot of panelists, and I don't want to spend a lot of time introducing them. Okay, so with that, here's Jill Hayes' bio. Sorry, Jill, I forgot to cycle through these. Senator Lewis.
Thank you. I want to recognize Senator Becker Roush, who I think came in after the introductions. Senator Roush is the Senate Chair of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and so wonderful to have her with us.
Make sure your mic is on.
Is the mic on?
Green button.
There we go. Let me do that again. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm State Senator Jason Lewis. Delighted to be with you. I actually just live in Winchester, so I'm your neighbor. And I wanted to recognize Senator Becker Roush, who just came in after the introductions. Senator Roush is the Senate Chair of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and so really appreciate her being here as well, along with our other colleagues. I want to start by acknowledging and thanking Representative Sokolow. you all know she's wonderful, of course, but what you may not know is she is the leader in the Massachusetts legislature on issues of waste, waste reduction. It was her idea to found the Zero Waste Caucus several years ago. She brought the idea to me. I thought it was a great idea, and I was happy to join her and team up with her. And I've just been amazed at the response that we've received, from our colleagues both in the House and Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, and as well as so many wonderful advocacy organizations and our constituents. And we're just, as Representative Sokolow said, just continuing to build more momentum as we go along. So thank you. I really appreciate your leadership in this area. As I'm sure you're well aware, the state legislature and our former administration under Governor Baker has been very focused on tackling climate change. And thank you to Representative Roy and Senator Barrett. Senator Barrett, you know very well as also. We passed two major climate bills over the last several years. I mean, really putting Massachusetts in the forefront of the nation. But I think it's fair to say that we have not really tackled the issue of waste, and it's time that we do. It's long overdue. So I'm proud to, along with Representative Sokolow, to be the lead sponsors of what we call the Omnibus Single-Use Plastics Reduction Bill. And as you heard, that is one of the pieces of legislation that we've identified as a priority for the Zero Waste Caucus last session, and then I expect it to be this session as well. There are a number of our colleagues who have filed bills that tackle individual single-use plastics products, whether that be plastic bags, water bottles, nips, and those are great, and we support all those bills. But what Representative Sokolow and I did when we wrote this bill with the help of particularly Kirsty Pecci, who was formerly with CLF, now she's with Just Zero. I think she may be with us today. What we strove to do in writing this bill was really to think comprehensively about how we could tackle a wide range of single-use plastics products to eliminate them entirely or significantly reduce them. As you know, and as I think you already heard from Representative Sokolow, there are numerous harms caused by single-use plastics. We're very short on time, so I won't get into any depth, but just to again reiterate, it's both the mining of fossil fuels to make the plastics, it's the manufacturing and distribution of the plastic products, which harms the environment and is a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions in their own right. It's the landfilling and the incineration of those plastic products, which releases toxic gases, and in particular disproportionately harms environmental justice communities, which are typically next to the landfills and the incinerators. Some of this plastic ends up as litter. It then goes into our waterways and into our oceans. And then it breaks down into microplastics, which are harmful to animal and human health. And as you heard, it's also a growing cost burden on our towns and cities because single-use plastic makes up a significant percentage of the municipal waste stream. The problem, unfortunately, has only gotten worse over the past decade. Very little single-use plastics is actually recycled. The production of plastic has grown tremendously. 86 million plastic water bottles were sold in the U.S. in 2021. That's nearly 30 times the production and sale rate from the 1990s. And by 2050, it's estimated there'll be more plastic in our oceans even than fish. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch already covers an area twice the size of Texas, and plastic makes up the majority of that debris. So what our bill would do is it basically builds upon successful local ordinances that have been passed in many of our own cities and towns, and also we looked at other cities and towns around the country. So the bill would implement a statewide single-use plastic bag ban, and about 100 of our cities and towns, I know Lexington's one of them, have done that already, so that would make that policy universal and statewide. The bill would also prohibit use of polystyrene and in terms of food service containers, foodware, and so on, because we know there are many sustainable alternatives to polystyrene. We would also includes straws, plastic straws, which would have to be by request only. Single-use plastic water bottles would also not be allowed for sale except in declared emergencies. The other products we include would be balloons, nips, which are the small single-use alcohol containers. Disposable plastic wipes would also be covered. They would no longer be allowed for sale. Small plastic hotel toiletries, because again, there are easy alternatives in hotels. Black plastic would also be is included in the bill and would not be allowed. And then in terms of plastic utensils, would have to be by request only for a fee. And then just this year, we actually added plastic bottle caps as well, that they have to be tethered. Like on this water bottle, because we know that's another problem as well. So I think I need to stop, but as you can tell, it's a pretty comprehensive bill, and it really does build on what has already been done successfully, in many cities and towns across Massachusetts and our country.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we have Patrick Prendergast, who is the Chief of Staff for the Judiciary Committee. And unfortunately, Chair Day couldn't attend today. He has quite a few things going on that derailed his schedule, but we are thrilled that we have the expert here who can talk to us about the EPR bill.
Well, thank you, Representative. Again, my name is Patrick Prendergast. I serve as Chief of Staff to Representative Michael Day. The representative was called into a meeting with leadership on another topic, gun safety in Massachusetts. So you'll be seeing us in similar tour-like fashion, crossing the Commonwealth, finding out what's working, what's not working. But he's very sorry that he couldn't be here because this is in his personal portfolio, and in the non-judiciary chair, this is his hallmark piece of legislation. So while he represents Stoneham Winchester, and I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out Ken Pruitt, the Town of Winchester Sustainability Director, where all great innovation starts is municipally. I am from the town of Sandwich, which I don't know if you read in the Globe, was in favor of the bottle ban before we were against it. And so I think that the need for comprehensive and statewide reform on those matters is critical. EPR is no different. I think that article also spoke to how contentious those issues can get, and my town is probably a good, bad example of that, at such a small and local level, right, where you're talking about personal behavior and what are your values versus somebody else's values. The whole purpose of extended producer responsibility is to stop having individuals look at each other for their own behavior and start looking at where these plastics come from in the first place. I think the pandemic laid bare, as you drove, as I think many of us did, probably more than we should have, around neighborhoods just to get out of the house, and you saw the packages piling up on people's front steps, even if they were home, like we all were the whole time. And then you get those packages, and just to get, I got a Hot Wheels car for my godson, and that was a plastic box within a plastic box within a plastic box. Not to mention when they peel an orange and then put it in a plastic container at the supermarket, which kind of kills me. So we know what the problems are, and we've heard from the senator about plastics in our ocean and what the impact they're having here in Massachusetts. So what is extended producer responsibility? In very simple terms, it's a carrot and stick approach, where we impose certain surcharges on the people, the organizations, and companies that are bringing plastics and packaging into Massachusetts. We then take that money, put it into a fund. That fund is then redistributed to our cities and towns to mitigate the costs of dealing with that waste once it leaves our homes. How and why? The how of this is that we're going to establish producer responsibility organizations. The idea is, I as a staffer don't know a whole lot about running a plastics corporation. I'm not sure that the Department of Environmental Protection will know a whole lot about running a plastics corporation. But people who do certainly would have a lot to say about what would work and what doesn't. What we're trying to do is initiate and invite private investment, private innovation by setting standards. We need you to become more recyclable, more renewable over time. And if you don't, you'll pay that's fine, but you'll be paying a higher fee. Alternatively, the more renewable and more recyclable your materials become, the less you pay. So ultimately, it'll provide private sector responses to meet our real environmental needs. The other side of this is where the money goes. Many cities and towns across Massachusetts used to get checks in the mail for their trash and for their recycling, and that was a net add to the budget. Today, depending on how you've negotiated your contract with the hauling company, that is incrementally raising significantly. Many cities and towns have no plan, really, for what to do in the next couple of years. Most of the places that we're purchasing our waste have no interest in it anymore. It's a massive problem. That means more overrides. That means any great idea you have to make your city or town better, or more, if you don't like how often the plows come for snow, we don't have that latitude anymore. So the basis of that is that we're going to be giving that back to the municipalities. This is the third time we have filed this piece of legislation. First time we vetted it, went through, started a lot of good conversations. Last session, with great help from the Environmental and Natural Resources Committee, we put out a really good redraft. This session, we've refiled it with a couple of tweaks, and already we've seen significant interest from industry, which to me says that they believe that this bill has legs, which it does, and it's something that is on the move. So if you're interested in supporting it, which I certainly hope that you all are, our proceedings in the legislature will now be hybrid moving forward, so you can follow along more easily. Certainly keep in touch with your local state representative and senator. Contact the committee. The bill itself is a placeholder for a conversation about how to get to the finish line and get something across, that works. But we're very excited to be at the table for it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Now I'm going to speak briefly about the bottle bill, and then we'll call up our next panel. So one of the zero waste priorities bills is the bottle bill, and there are quite a few pieces of legislation that have been filed this session. We actually have 10 distinct bills. Some of them are smaller bills, like extending the bottle bill to nips or adding certain types of containers, which is terrific. But we also have several very comprehensive bottle bills. So a couple of the ones that are worth watching are HD 3912, 3420, and SD 2038. Let me just tell you what makes a good bottle bill, because I think we're going to see all of these different pieces of legislation be reviewed together through a single hearing, and at some point we have to get to the finish line. And we'll talk to our chairs of TUE about that in a little bit. We have a dismal redemption rate in Massachusetts. It's fallen to lower than 40%. So 6 out of 10 of our bottles that are eligible to be redeemed are actually thrown out. And most people know at this point that only 5% or less than 5% of all of our plastics even get recycled. The curbside recycling system, which is the alternative to redemption, has a contaminated waste stream because it's mixed with bottles that have chemicals in them and a whole slew of different things. And so any items that are lucky enough to be separated out of curbside are downcycled and not used for clean, new drinking bottles. That's why the bottle redemption program is so important, because when you take clean drinking bottles, glass or plastic, 100% of those bottles can be recycled because they're not contaminated. So we need to raise our redemption rate, and that's something that many of us don't understand. We all think we're doing the right thing by throwing those bottles in our curbside bins, but we actually have to start taking the bottles back. So what makes a good bottle bill? You have to have a high enough deposit to actually motivate people to bring it back. I know all kinds of people say, why should I bother? It's only 5 cents. You have to have a high enough handling fee. The handling fee is paid by the bottle manufacturer, not by the consumer. And that fee needs to be high enough to incentivize small local businesses to open up to collect those bottles. We actually want to improve the availability of being able to redeem those bottles. And we have to have universal return to retail. Right now, so few retailers actually take those bottles back. And it's a bit of a confusing maze to determine, well, I bought this here, can I bring it back there? Do I have to go to yet another store to bring it to a different place? That's not going to work for consumers. We also need to cover more drink containers. Right now in Massachusetts, we don't cover nearly enough. And there's all kinds of new types of drinks, sports drinks and kombucha and specialty juices that are not being controlled through the bottle deposit system, and we need to expand to include all those types of beverages. And we have to have enforceable targets for redemption and recycling. That's a key piece to having a performing system that works right. And a good definition that excludes any kind of combustion as a means of recycling. So a lot of people call it recycling and they incinerate it through high heat melting of the plastic, which is actually not productive or good for the environment. Ideally, we want to have refill targets that mirror the targets that industry professionals are already putting out. So beverage companies are already talking about doing refills, but we want our bill to actually make sure that they perform the way they are intending to perform. And we need to ban toxics in the materials and bottles themselves. So many things are lined now with unsafe plastics in our cans and in various drink bottles, and we want to make sure that that's removed so that the consumer is not harmed. And we want to have independent accountability. Patrick was talking to you about producer responsibility organizations, PROs. We do have PRO systems for bottle bills, but we want to make sure that we actually have an independent either commission or state agency like DEP that enforces the accountability provisions so that we actually get the results that we want. So that's what makes a good bottle bill. I'm not going to go into detail about the difference between some of these bills, but I will say that we want to make sure that we cover as many bottles as possible. That's one of the things that is in HD 3912. And there's quite a few other things that make that bottle bill go a little bit further than the version that was submitted last session. So if you want to learn more about this, I'm happy to share with you after the program. We have a lot of panelists, and we have a superstar keynote to get to. So I'm going to thank our panelists and call the next panel up.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I asked the chairs of the TUE, the Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Committee, to come and speak to us today, and we have the legislative director from the Environmental Committee. The bills that we are concerned with primarily go to either the Environmental Committee or TUE. The bottle bill in particular goes to TUE and certain other waste-related bills. These two gentlemen also collaborate quite closely with the Environmental Committee, and I think we did acknowledge that we have the chair of the Environmental Committee from the Senate, Becca Rausch, here as well today. She's not one of our panelists, but I'm so grateful that she came to participate and listen to our program. So with that, I would like to ask Senator Barrett to begin.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle. I want to echo. I want to turn on my mic.
That's why I'm here.
Thank you, Representative Roy. I want to hail a colleague of ours, Senator Moran, who hasn't been introduced as of yet. Thank you very much, Sue, for coming. And I know Senator Rausch is here in the building to join us as well. Two committees get jurisdiction over this legislation. We're going to hear from NRA. Actually, the A from NRA, which stands for Agriculture, has been removed. Agriculture now gets its own committee. So one of the things we're going to do at the conclusion of this event today is to have a contest for how you pronounce ENR without the A, because nobody knows in the State House what we're going to refer to the committee, but we're about to hear from a speaker who can help us out. Bills on these topics are divided between NR and TUE. Jeff and I preside over a committee that gets the extended bottle bill. I want to echo Senator Lewis in praising Representative Sokolo, who really is the founder of the zero waste concept. I'd like to reflect for a moment on why the bills haven't moved, because there's a backstory, not that any of us, even in the legislature, understand it perfectly, but there certainly has to be a backstory with respect to our failure collectively as a legislature and as an executive branch to expand the bottle bill, because that's been on tap for, and I want someone to correct me, but 20 years. That goes, it always takes 6 to 8 to pass an important idea, but an expanded bottle bill's been on tap longer than that. And I can tell you that we did pass a major climate bill in 2022, and in the course of that, thanks to terrific advocacy by Senator Cynthia Cream, who's the primary Senate sponsor of an expanded bottle bill, she and I advocated explicitly to include an expanded bottle bill in the Senate version of the climate bill. And we failed to make the case. And one needs to reflect on why that's true. I have a couple of theories, but all of us need to engage with this because, of course, we have to overcome whatever drag is there, whatever resistance is there. One thing became clear to me as I engaged in this internal discussion, and that's that in the views of some, the bottle bill was adjacent to the climate issue, but not of the climate issue. If you're going to focus on reducing emissions in Massachusetts, this problem of adjacency rather than centrality occurs again and again and again. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. We did a good job in 2021 as a legislature in indicating that we intended to impose sublimits on emissions attributable to Massachusetts. So there's a limit, a sublimit we have to meet to reduce emissions every 5 years from residential dwellings, a second one from transportation, a third one having to do with the generation of electricity, a fourth one having to do with industrial and commercial buildings, and a fifth having to do with industrial processes. I hope and I expect that we're going to make progress on all 5 domains, but if that plastics product has come into Massachusetts from a distribution point outside the state, reducing emissions attributable to it doesn't count against any of the 5 domains I've just mentioned and tends to be, well, adjacent. It doesn't seem to matter because we're talking inside baseball in a sense, but I can tell you that when you take a look at the executive branch's plans made responsive to the legislature's passage of this stuff, reduction of waste appears nowhere in their plans to reduce emissions because the emissions aren't necessarily attributed to Massachusetts. Now, the good news is that all of us are becoming more sophisticated thinkers as we take note of the emissions reductions that we can control in state. We become hypersensitive about the life cycle issue and the fact that we consume stuff even when the emissions are in another state or in another part of the world, sometimes a part of the world much poorer than the part in which we live. So we're getting more thoughtful about life cycle emissions. We're getting more thoughtful about the need finally to act on this long pending legislative priority that Michelle, because you've got a great bill that's going to come before TUE. But all of us need to take a step back and to ask why this one has taken so long so that we can figure out what to do about it. I'm over time. I have an idea or two, but maybe we can get to it at another point. I want to yield the floor back to you, Representative.
Thank you, Senator. We look forward to many further discussions and working with you closely in TUE. So, Chairman Roy, I think you're up.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here in beautiful Lexington, Massachusetts. I did get a text while you were talking about and we learned that it was the Environmental Committee, so I'm going to recommend EVCOM.
There you go.
How's that? All right?
What is it?
EVCOM. Nobody likes it.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
Well, and I also want to recognize Representative Garbali is here, the House Chair of the Global Warming and Climate Change. Good to see you. And last year had an opportunity to look at the waste issues in the bottle bill, and I can tell you, meeting and talking with a lot of the advocacy groups, talking to legislators who had filed the bills, visiting some of the producers, visiting some of the recycling plants and some of the waste-to-energy plants. I learned a lot about it, but something that became clear to me is that we need solutions to improve our recycling capabilities. I think that's why we're all here today, and the Massachusetts rate of 30% is abysmal, and we need to improve that. And the second thing is we need a market for our recycled materials, especially if we have a goal to recycle more. And the fact that many places, as Representative Sokolow had said, are not taking our waste, that's a problem that we need to solve. So one of the things in creating a market for recycled products, I have filed a bill called an Act Enhancing Circularity and Recycling, and that bill is going to set minimum post-consumer recycled content requirements for specific types of products or materials sold and offered for sale in Massachusetts. So I invite you to take a look at that. I have a lot of details here, but it's 2 pages full, and I'm going to try to get us back on time. And the other thing is I will say that I think we should take some lessons from our dear friends in Europe about how to employ state-of-the-art technology to generate some creative and impactful solutions. And one thing I will call to your attention, I had the privilege to travel to Copenhagen, Denmark, where I visited a place called Copenhill. And Copenhill is a hub for urban mountain sports. It's located within view of downtown Copenhagen. In fact, at the top of this facility, which is about 9 stories up, they have a beautiful observation deck where you can see the city on one side and the bay with the beautiful windmills on the other side. But this is actually, and it actually has a ski slope that goes down the roof line of this waste-to-energy facility, so you can ski down it. And it also has Europe's highest rock climbing wall, and only 500 people are certified to climb that rock wall. And to me, I looked at this. This is a waste-to-energy facility, and I can tell you the waste-to-energy facilities that I've visited in the beautiful Commonwealth of Massachusetts absolutely stink to high heavens, and not the places that I want to send my children or any family members to ski or do any other recreational activities there. But I saw in Copenhagen an effort to really tackle a problem. They take in post-recycled waste, and they take care of 300 trucks a day, and they process those materials without contributing to global warming. So something that you may want to take a peek at, and I think those types of things will really help us improve our recycling rates, create a market for the recycled materials. They have value, and deal with the waste that's left over at the end. So that, in a nutshell, is what I'll be focused on this session, along with all of these bills that will make their way to our committee, and we can assure you that you will have them heard, and hopefully we will see your faces at the hearings to support these bills as we try to get them through the legislature this session. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Roy. Music to our ears as we try to get them through the legislature this session. We're counting on the 2 of you, so we're thankful for that. Our next speaker is Shannon Emmett. She is fantastic. She's the research director for, we don't know what to call the committee name anymore, but it used to be ENRA. And I just want to say a personal thank you. She did some amazing...
I'm going to put in another plug for EVCOM. You didn't hear me. EVCOM, EVCOM.
Shannon did a terrific job over many sessions, but in particular last session, she also organized quite a few fantastic tours of mattress recycling facilities and bottle recycling facilities, and they've been very educational for the members of the Zero Waste Caucus and the ENRA committee members, and so I'm grateful for that. So Shannon, please tell us a little bit about the bills we have before us this session.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Rep. Socolo. So most of the bills that you've heard about today, with the exception of the bottle bill, did come before the formerly ENRA committee last session and advanced favorably out of committee. So we expect to receive most of them again next session, and looking forward to working with the sponsors and the advocates and the stakeholders. As Patrick mentioned, we're really seeing industry come to the table on these issues, so we're looking forward to working with them further next session. And in the meantime, since those bills have advanced out of the committee has been really busy watching other states. I know we usually like to think of ourselves here in Massachusetts as leaders nationwide on most issues, but we're certainly seeing neighboring states like New Jersey, who's implementing a plastic bag ban bill right now. States like Maine, Oregon, and Connecticut are implementing EPR for plastic packaging, for mattresses, for electronics, and other products. And so we're watching those closely and learning from their successes, trying to learn and anticipate any challenges that we might see here when we hopefully do get some of these issues across the finish line here in Massachusetts. And as we do look at these bills again this session, we're focusing on a few key issues. One that you've heard mentioned a few times that's really important is supporting our municipalities. We understand that costs for recycling, waste management, composting services, curbside collection are really increasing, and it's a significant burden on our cities and towns. So looking at each piece of legislation on these products through that lens of making sure that we're there as a state to support our cities and towns. And the other key issue that we're looking at when thinking about plastics especially is PFAS, also known as the forever chemicals that have really harmful impacts on the environment and our public health. There has been omnibus legislation filed this session by Rep. Kate Hogan and Senator Julian Sear that reflects the recommendations of the PFAS task force and the work that they did last session. We're not yet sure which committee that bill might land in, but there are a couple key provisions that the Environment and Natural Resources Committee will be looking at really closely. One is the ban of PFAS in plastic packaging, food packaging, and other household products that could pose public health harm, as well as establishing funds for the remediation of our natural resources that have been contaminated by PFAS. So we know that when plastic and other items containing PFAS land in our landfills, that contaminates our soil, it contaminates our water resources, and it affects our public health when we consume our water resources. So those are some of the provisions that we'll definitely be looking at in that legislation this session, but we'll also be bringing the lens of regulating PFAS to some of the other bills that we'll be looking at this session. And actually, Rep. Dan Cahill was actually just appointed chair of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee today. So we're looking forward to working under his leadership, along with Senate Chair Becca Rausch, who's here and will be joining us again this session. So I also want to mention that the committee's researcher, Andrea Bolduck, is here today too, so please feel free to find us at the end of the event. We'd love to hear from you, and we're hoping to see you at the public hearings when we hear more about these bills this session. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you. What a great panel. You guys really know what you're doing, so I have lots of confidence we're going to have great progress this session. Thank you all. We have one final panel. This is the advocacy panel. So I invite those folks to come up, please. So in constructing this panel, I took a look at some of the agencies and advocacy groups that do so much in this space statewide, but we're also going to hear from a local expert who's doing a tremendous amount here in our own community in Lexington, and from a national expert. So I'm really excited about this panel, and we're going to start with Juan. I think you're first.
Sure. Yeah. Let me see. Here we are. My name is Juan Pablo Jaramillo. I'm the political director at ELM. And I'm really excited. Thank you for having us, Rep. Socolo. You've been a leader around this issue, and not just by the work that you do in the legislature, but ensuring that there's the political environment to do this out in the streets by creating places like this, which I would call third places, which are so vital to democracy and civil society, and to this conversation that we're having about waste, right? You know, I spent a lot of time thinking about who is in office and why that matters, right? And it matters because if you didn't send us to the legislature, someone like Rep. Sicolo or like some of the elected leaders, state leaders that are here, this stuff would not even come up to a bill, right? We wouldn't see this in bills. This stuff would not be talked about in places and forums like this, and that is so important. And a lot of the time I spent in the last year, particularly, is to elect leaders like Rep. Sicolo. And it's so important to continue to be engaged civically in this space, right? In addition to important bills that we've discussed today, right? Some of the things that expand and grow our democracy, like the Votes Act that the legislature took up and voted on last year, continues to broaden the perspectives that come to the legislature that allow for these conversations to happen, that create that ecosystem for these bills to get passed and sent to the legislature. And oftentimes, one vote does matter. I don't know if people have been following the drama up in the Merrimack Valley, but we literally flipped a seat from a person who probably isn't sympathetic to our issues by one vote. And it took a couple of weeks, but we got it done. And that person is now a state representative, and I'm sure will be an ally to our issues, right? And that's so important because, yes, they do a great job at the state level, but we also have to think about the municipal level. You know, actually, my state representative is here, Just Janino, who began at the municipal level as a city councilor. And before that, you know, she was a little rebel rouser in high school, but we won't get into that. You know, supporting municipal action is so important. Those candidates that you're voting for this year in the municipal year are the bench, right? We sent in Revere a great state representative to the legislature because we sent her first to the city council. And when we talk about waste issues, things that matter to you and us on the day-to-day, because who here doesn't take out the trash? Who here doesn't do their recycling? Who here doesn't do their composting? Oh. But there's a lot of communities who don't even have composting, and that's important, right? Maybe Lexington does, I don't know if it does, but
We're working on it.
we're working on it. It happens at the municipal level, right? And I know that the representative has been an ally to ensuring that those leaders are coming at all levels of government, but certainly at the municipal level. It does start at the municipal level. The state level is very important. Obviously, our federal delegation could not be better. And I see the congresswoman here, but who's now our neighbor. Welcome to Revere. So, not to say that the world revolves around Revere, but it does. And so, and so, you know, all these things are so vital. And I'm going to go back to kind of how I started, which is talking about third places, right? Because when you're a community like Lexington, when there is a lot of access to a lot of different things, ensuring that we are being good allies and good partners for those organizations, churches, halls, that bring people together to have these conversations is so vital. It's so vital to ensuring that that the bottle bill doesn't take another 10 years, that we can get the extended producer responsibility bill across the finish line and into the governor's desk. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Juan. Our next speaker is Janet Dominitz, and she describes herself as the grandmother of the bottle bill, so we're very excited to have her here.
So I got called that at a hearing. I didn't make up that name, believe me.
I love it, though.
And I'm only 23. How did I get that name? It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Rep. Sicolo, and thank you to Senator Lewis for being leaders in the state legislature on these issues. And so great to see people. I'm really honored to be here. Rep Socolo asked me to talk about how MassPIRG has been involved in these issues and what we're planning for the coming session. So let me briefly summarize the answer to both those questions. First of all, how we've been involved. I have to say, when I saw the title for this event is Waste Not, Want Not, it spoke right to my heart. The reason that I walked into the door of MassPIRG in 1980 is really because of the way that I was brought up. And waste not, want not was something that was said in our household all the time. My grandmother used to say, enough is too much. And I don't think I really understood it until I started delving into these issues. And so, you know, I still have on my bulletin board in the basement the poem I wrote in 1970 in 6th grade for the first Earth Day. And I really do come to this work with the legacy of my family and the sensibility of what it is not to waste and what it is to care for our Earth. So personally, I was so excited to talk about the history. For MassPIRG, you know, we cut our teeth on the bottle bill. The organization started in the early 70s, and in 1976, we went to the ballot with the bottle bill, and we lost by like 0.1%, even though it was just like a few years old. When I walked in the door in 1980, we were trying again, because when we lost in 76, you can't go back to the ballot for 6 years, and so we were running a legislative campaign, and against, you know, all the odds, we did win the original bottle bill in 1982, and as you've already heard from several legislators today, sorely in need of an update. But from there, I mean, the history of MassPIRG's involvement, when I look back, we spent a lot of those, you know, first years just identifying the pollution that is, you know, involves disposal. So, you know, what it means to have an incinerator, what it means to have a landfill in your community, and the kind of pollution that comes with that. And, you know, made some strides there, although certainly there's still plenty of work to do, and then spent a number of years talking about how we need access to recycling. But more recently, really, recycling is not going to get us out of the mess that we are in, and we have gone back to talking about Reduce First, and the program that used to be called Solid Waste at MassPIRG is now called the Zero Waste Program, and we mean that quite literally. And we have the roadmap to get to zero waste. You've heard all afternoon about the different policies. We know how to reduce the waste that we generate, and reduce should be first. And so over the years, we've gone from, you know, identifying dirty disposal to talking about recycling, and now we start with, we've got to get to zero waste. That's what comes first. And we feel like all the bills, including updating the bottle bill, but all the bills, probably all 75 of the bills that Rep Socolo mentioned, there's no one magic bullet. We've got to do all of it. But look at this room. You know, we're ready. We're ready to do all of it. So that's a good segue into number two. What are we doing in the coming year? I feel lucky to be part of a national federation. So we will look at this at a state level. I mean, most of my time is spent in Massachusetts and advocating for laws here, and I also have a seat on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee of the DEP. So we will absolutely be championing all the policies in state that have to do with zero waste. We're also pushing for the federal bill, and I'm so thrilled to see my Congresswoman Clark here today. At last count, we have 70 students from around the country signed up for a national lobby day. I'm so bottle bill focused. A national lobby day. They're going to DC to champion and break free from plastic, your bill, and they are, as you can imagine, you know, the youth are just extremely insistent that we need to stop trashing our planet. So we will be pushing bills in Congress, and then around the country, my sister PIRGs, where we have, you know, we've targeted Amazon, we have a campaign going on there. We have a number of corporate campaigns. Again, we need to do everything, and we need to do it soon, and I am just really honored and pleased to be a part of this effort, and look forward to working with all of you to move the ball forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Next, we have Yen Nguyen, who is our local expert on waste and has done some amazing things that she's going to share with you.
Thank you, Rep Socolo, for the opportunity to share our organization's work with everyone here today.
I'm going to invite you to lean into the mic.
Hello? Okay. I'm honored to speak on behalf of my wonderful and hardworking colleagues at Lexington Zero Waste Collaborative, whose volunteer work powers the programs and advocacy that we engage in. Lex Zero Waste is a young organization founded in 2020. Our mission is to raise awareness and take action to address the impacts of our consumption choices. Our goal is to reduce waste in our town by promoting sustainable practices through advocacy, access, education, and collaboration. During our first year in operation, we received a grant from the Community Endowment of Lexington to develop and implement 2 pilot programs. One pilot program is called LexSort, which stands for Lexington Shared Organics Recovered Together. We partnered with the town's Department of Public Works to host this free composting drop-off pilot program in September of 21. Participants receive a starter kit that consists of a countertop collection bin and some compostable liners. While LexSort is still going strong and has activated close to 400 households to divert their food waste for composting, we also recognize the need for universal access to composting as part of a larger plan to reach zero waste townwide. Thank you. So we initiated a citizens petition and successfully advocated for the town to adopt a zero waste resolution during the spring of 22. The resolution was overwhelmingly supported by town meeting members and many town residents, including our own Representative Sicolo, and community groups such as LPS Green Teams and Lexington Climate Action Network, and town entities such as the Sustainable Lexington Committee and our Board of Health. The resolution affirmed community values and asked the town to adopt and model zero waste principles and to develop a zero waste plan as soon as possible that would also include a plan for townwide compost services. Just 10 days ago, a draft zero waste plan was presented to our select board, along with a proposal for a curbside composting pickup pilot program, which received support from our select board. Now it's a matter of prioritizing this curbside pilot program in our town's budget so that 2,000 households will be able to divert their food waste via curbside pickup starting in July. Our other pilot program, which will launch on March 1st, is called Zero to Go. Participants in this pilot will be able to order takeout from a popular restaurant in town called Royal India Bistro and receive takeout food in our reusable and durable stainless steel containers that customers would return to the restaurant to be cleaned and reused, the same as what the restaurant would do with their dine-in foodware. We've partnered with a Boston-based business called Useful, who's providing the technology to track the containers and measure the impact of replacing single-use disposable containers with durable, reusable containers. Our goal is for other restaurants to join the reusable takeout movement also, so that zero waste takeout will become standard practice. Reaching zero waste as a town will require the engagement not only of residents, our elected officials and town staff, but also of our business community. We can vote with our dollars. With that in mind, we also support and promote businesses that provide access to low-waste shopping options where customers can bring in their own reusable containers and refill them with household staples like personal care and cleaning products. Lexington is fortunate to have such a store in town called Center Goods. I encourage you to check out Center Goods if you haven't already. We've also facilitated a discounted low-waste shopping opportunity this week at another refill store in Concord called Deborah's Next Door Refillery, where you can bring your own containers and refill them with dry food products from bulk bins in addition to other household products. Businesses like Center Goods and Deborah's Refillery should be the norm and not the exception. Community art is another tool that we use for advocacy. We've collaborated with the Monroe Center for the Arts on an Earth Day sculpture project to raise awareness about the non-recyclability of black plastics and the incineration of waste. We are working together again on another project to raise awareness about the amount of plastic that we ingest unknowingly, the potential for harm, and what we can do as individuals and a community to change our habits for the betterment of all. If you'd like to learn more about us, what we do, I encourage you to visit our website at lexzerowaste.org and subscribe to our newsletter. We invite everyone to join us to develop and share solutions. We're all in this together, so please consider joining us and volunteering. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you, Yen. We have one more panelist, and then we have our keynote speaker. I know we are all anxious to hear from her. Before we go to our final panelist, I just want to thank all the legislators again. It's awfully hard to know who's here, and I know that we've had a few come in the since we first introduced them. I know that Rep. Garbely is here, Rep. Giannino, Rep. Shand, Rep. Scarsdale, Rep. Phillips, Rep. Elliott, Senator Moran, Senator Roush, of course we have Rep. Roy, and Senator Barrett, Senator Lewis. So again, a thank you to the folks that are here from the Zero Waste Caucus. And if I miss someone, you'll have to let me know. I'm sorry, I can't see the audience all that well. So if you snuck in and you didn't register or sign in, let me know. Okay, our last speaker, our last panelist is Kirsty Pecci. She is our go-to person on waste. She is the person who helps us write all these bills. She's truly a national expert. None of us could do the work we're doing without her. Kirsty.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me here today. So there are a lot of themes that I want to bring together before we hear from our keynote, and I know that Rep. Sikola was saying when she said we're very anxious to hear her, hurry up, Kirsty, so I will try and keep it short. At Just Zero, we were working at Conservation Law Foundation, great organization. We have an attorney from there here today, and realized that this problem is a national problem. And it doesn't mean that the solutions are all national. As we just heard, a lot of the best solutions are happening locally. And our states in this country are a laboratory for figuring out what works. And we know what works, to be perfectly honest. Bottle bills really frickin' work. Okay, they work. They're the best recycling program we have. Clean materials back, as you heard from Rep. Sikola. Extended producer responsibility can really work, especially if you write it right. Bans on non-recyclable plastic, which is most of, if not all, non-recyclable plastic is, pretty hinky, pretty dirty. We want to be phasing it out whenever we can. We want to phase out single-use materials whenever we can. We know how to do that because of places like Lexington and other towns that have done that, and other states that have done that across the country. Why isn't this happening? What's happening at every state and at every town and at the federal level is that we're up against it. This is the petroleum industry's plan B, okay? Plastic is inundating every walk of life because of that. They need to sell that or they're out of business. Also, the beverage industry and the producers of all the food and other products that are packaged don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be in charge of the cost of the end life of the materials. So what we see across the board are beverage companies going into state governments and trying to take over the bottle bills. They want to set the targets. They want to say whether they're compliant or not. And they want to say, well, if there's no place to recycle it, we're going to burn it. And this is true for all the producer companies. So you have to be aware that that's what we're dealing with. A lot of states are looking at producer responsibility for packaging bills that don't reduce and detoxify the way that Representative Day's bill does. They're looking at bills that instead, Connecticut is doing this right now, would allow a lot of this plastic, if it's not recyclable, to be burned. So what we're seeing is that the plastic industry is using EPR as a loophole, as a way to increase the incineration of these materials, which can never be done safely. We're also seeing the ACC, $100 million a year nonprofit, working really hard, American Chemistry Council, working really hard to convince legislators like those in this room that different types of burning are safe. And they're trying to convince them that we can just do that staged combustion, pyrolysis, gasification, instead of phasing out single-use goods. Right now, they purchased a 24-acre parcel in Templeton, and they're going to go into your offices and they're going to say, you don't need to ban plastic bags, we're going to take them there. And it's a lie. They can't process them there, and they can't make them into new plastic. They just break them down to be burned. So that's what we're up against here, and that's why, as Senator Barrett said, why hasn't this happened? Big money. That's why this hasn't happened so far. We have good solutions. We need to put them in place. Composting, as we said, is another one that we know should be happening. DEP's been working towards that. Now with this new administration, we need to make sure that we focus on banning non-recyclable plastics like those in the omnibus bill. We need to make sure we put a bottle bill modernization in place that can grow itself. So we have to increase the deposit. It happens automatically. We don't have to go to war every time we want to do that. And when a nickel or a dime isn't worth what a nickel or a dime used to be worth. We need to make sure that when these corporate interests come to your offices, that you have the data that you need to protect these bills and make sure that what crosses the finish line is actually worth doing. Because honestly, the EPR bill that I saw in Colorado is not worth passing. That's more of a problem than a help. Just because a bill has an environmental green stamp on it doesn't mean it's good for the environment. So we need to make sure that we keep our eye on the prize and actually solve the toxicity problem. And one of the best ways to do that, is to always look to our environmental justice communities. They don't build these horrible burning facilities, stage combustion, chemical recycling, advanced recycling, in rich communities. They don't build them in a Lexington, to be perfectly honest. They don't build them in a Weston, because we have the resources here to investigate and fight these facilities off. If we make sure that we don't allow our most impoverished and least powerful people to be burdened by these horrible facilities and practices, then we will make sure that we pass good bills, good, strong bills that actually solve our problems. And we're working on this at the state level to replicate these bills across the country at Just Zero. We're working to help the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Coalition revise the bill that Congresswoman Clark is going to be sponsoring, I'm hoping. And we're really, really thankful that we have all of you in the room who care about this, because whether you're working locally or at the state level or at the national level, the connecting to each other and learning from each other and making sure we share those resources is the only way that we speak out, that we can stop these big corporate interests who are truly trying to end the world. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Kirsty. What a fantastic panel. Thank you all. Okay, and now the moment we're all waiting for. Congresswoman Clark is no stranger. She's here in her home district, and we are absolutely thrilled to have her here with us today. She's been a mentor for me. I think I've known her since she was a state rep and then a state senator, and it's been a joy to watch her career catapult to the top. She has just, her energy and enthusiasm and hardworking nature has made her one of the most effective leaders in Congress. And I think everyone knows that, that she is the second highest ranking Democrat in Congress now, and has had an amazing career. And we're very much hoping she is going to sponsor the Break Free from Plastics Act. But I'll just say that a little bit about her background, if you don't know. She's been a representative for 10 years, and prior to her time in the House, she served as a state senator and a state representative. She was general counsel for the Mass Office of Child Care Services and policy chief for the state attorney general. And we're hoping to hear more from her today about the Break Free from Plastics Act. So Katherine, come on up.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I'm telling you, you are a sight for sore eyes. It is so wonderful to be here with all of you doing this important work together. And I especially want to thank my friend, Representative Sokolow, for your kind words, for your leadership, and for gathering so many voices here today for a greener future. It is truly a pleasure to join all of you, and it is my privilege to call you partners in this fight. But I do have to clear up just a few things before we start. One, I told Representative Roy that I would officially endorse the EVCOM. So, you know, I do think it has sort of a DOD ring to it, and we must remember that DOD has determined that climate change is our #1 threat to our national security. So I think it's appropriate. And then we seem to have a little Revere Lexington rivalry going on here, maybe. But as I've been looking at the podium and the motto, I've been sort of revising it in my head to what a glorious movement for America. And that's what we are part of here today with the nonstop efforts of the Zero Waste Caucus and each of the advocates in this room. We're building a stronger, more sustainable Commonwealth, and we're blazing the trail for a more just nation and forging our way to a healthier planet. And we're securing a future that truly honors every person's right to clean air, clean water, and clean communities. And as our panelists have made abundantly clear today, that effort will be won or lost in the fight to get control of waste. And this just isn't about the mountains of trash in our landfills. This is about plastic being part of every part of our ecosystem, in our rainwater, in our soil, in our lakes and rivers, and in our own bodies. And this statistic keeps going up. I think when I first started hearing about that we eat enough plastic, credit cards worth of plastic, it was like every 6 months, every year. It is now every week. Every week we eat a credit card's worth of plastic. And along the way, plastic production is accelerating and is already at a catastrophic level. Here in the United States, we produce 51 million tons of plastic every year, and we recycle just 5% of that. And that's not just a national crisis. It's a global threat with very real local consequences. But our Commonwealth is proving we can respond with solutions at every single level. And Massachusetts remains one of the few states in the nation with a bottle bill on the books, and we're going to do even more and make it one that truly encourages the recycling at the levels that you have been talking about, Michelle. And local leaders across Massachusetts have banned plastic bags, including right here in Lexington. And our cities are getting rid of synthetic materials like polystyrene out of the waste cycle, again, including right here in Lexington. And our champions in the Zero Waste Caucus are fighting to go further. Representative Socolo and my good friend Senator Lewis are leading the way. Their visionary plastics bill will expand these common sense rules statewide while setting our sights even higher, getting plastic straws, wipes, utensils, and more out of our ecosystem. Michelle is leading the way to leading the charge to modernize, strengthen, and expand our bottle bill, as she explained. And Mike Day is fighting to hold producers responsible for the waste they create. And in the fight to save our planet, America needs some new ideas. We need innovative strategies. And those solutions are percolating right here at home. They're being forged and tested right here in Massachusetts. And it's one of the many reasons that every day when I'm in Washington and I pull open that door to the House of Representatives, I am so proud to be from Massachusetts, to be from the 5th District. And I am grateful to be able to be in a position to bring these ideas not only to Congress, but to the leadership table. And that's what we need to do, expand and take these on a national scale with the urgency that they deserve. So I do want to talk a little bit about some of the accomplishments we were able to put together in Congress in the 117th. With the infrastructure law, we delivered the EPA's largest recycling investment in 30 years. We are empowering communities to modernize their waste management, expand their education and outreach, and bolster the collection of dangerous items like batteries. And with the Inflation Reduction Act, we enacted the largest climate investment in history. We sped up our transition to clean, renewable economy and putting us on track to slash carbon pollution by 40% by the end of the decade. And under President Biden's administration, we are moving the ball forward, directing agencies to reduce their waste, clearing plastics off of our federal lands and out of our federal parks, unveiling the EPA's first ever national recycling strategy, and sprinting to get our recycling rate up by 50%, up to 50% by 2030. So we've made important progress, and a lot of the funding that is tied to those bills are going to be opportunities for Massachusetts to fund these vital programs and move it forward. But we know there is much more work to do. I've been proud to be part of leading the fight for the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, federal legislation that would build on the progress that's being forged right here in Massachusetts and transform our nation's capacity to reuse, to reduce, and recycle its waste. And right now, that effort, frankly, is running up against a majority in the House that is really set on turning the clock backwards. The infrastructure bill, with what it was able to do, the funding that will be coming to communities like Lexington and others here in Massachusetts, only received 7 Republican votes. That was the infrastructure bill. The Inflation Reduction Act, with all the climate investments, received 0. 0. And that is number 1 on their priority agenda to overturn, to take back not only what we were able to do with climate, but also take back and undo the cost savings for health care we were able to put in for our seniors, like a $35 cap on insulin that just went into place. But they can delay, they can distract, they can obstruct, but we can't slow down the momentum of this movement. And that's where all of you come in. All of these ideas are built upon and give us strength to make the case for national funding, for changes in national policy. And we have the advantage right now of being able to move into the implementation phase of all the legislation that we passed. We need to do it together. We need to keep insisting and bringing the innovation we're seeing on full display here today to the national conversation. And I know that watching it can feel quite chaotic and discouraging. But one of my favorite thinkers and role models is Brian Stevenson. And he always reminds us that hopelessness is the enemy of justice. And you cannot leave this symposium today not feeling hopeful and optimistic. And that's what we keep doing. The small steps we take in our communities make huge difference to our country. And that's how we're going to make the change. We're going to insist on it. We're going to insist that environmental justice is good for everybody, that there is no plan B for this planet, that your vote, as Juan so eloquently laid out, matters. Put this on the top of your agenda when you are evaluating candidates, both local, state, and federal. And when we do that, we can be the game changers. And we can be the ones that when we put the federal plastics bill on the president's desk, I'm going to be able to say that it was born and raised in Massachusetts. So I just want to thank you again for your incredible support, for the work you do, and just know the power of your voice. Know the power of our collective actions that start with each of our own personal commitment. And I am just so grateful to all of you, and want to thank you again, Michelle and Jason, for inviting me here today, and to all of you for meeting this challenge with great innovation and energy and solutions. Thank you.
Isn't she wonderful? Congresswoman Clark, we feel hopeful because we have you fighting for us. Thank you again. You're amazing. So that concludes our program. We do actually have some cookies to share and a little bit of time to mingle in the hall if folks want to. I hope that you brought your water bottles because we're not providing any drinks. We're trying to keep this as waste-free as possible. Again, a thank you to all the panelists. You were fantastic. Your words were inspiring. Your knowledge is incredible, and we know we can make progress when we all work on this together. So let's go do it. Thank you, everyone.